Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. Welcome back to the Stop Overthinking podcast. It is a guest episode today. I have Kristen Samuel here with us, and we are going to have a fantastic conversation for you all. Kristen is an inner work coach, facilitator, author, and speaker who champions relational intelligence and heart-centered wisdom. With her deep understanding of the inner workings of the human experience and expertise in mindfulness practices, she skillfully cultivates a safe space for deep connections and authentic communication. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen, for having me on your podcast.
Yes. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to doing the work that you do now.
Well, I guess that's a long journey, but I could say that I suffered high functioning anxiety in my young age and even didn't know I had that. I thought it's just my personalities until my 30s. And then a lot of healings going on, also including a autoimmune disease that made me think, what's going on? Like I didn't have trauma, everything was fine, my career went well, but then that is really make me return to what is happening inside me, and I start looking at what happened with my thoughts, my experience, my body, and that goes into the journey. Also, coming from 20 plus year of corporate career, and went to say myself, if it's not now, when? If it's not who, me? And I just left everything behind and start over. It's been 3 years journey. I wrote a book about the Heartspace, and the way I do it is just by living and embody it, so I can write it in a very powerful way. Overcoming my own fear, because I think I stay for a long time because I'm afraid. I always fearful
Yes.
about the uncertainty about the future, but I knew what I did before didn't work, so I had to try a different way. And a different way, it's just like, here I am, letting go, and in full surrender, and returning to being a child again, being curious, being playful, doing things because I want to do it, not because I gonna get somewhere, or if I do A, I gonna get B. But can I return to that joy of creating, connecting, and really unlearn things that I thought it's me, or all the beliefs
Yes.
that I would say create the walls and limitation who I am.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And I think many of our listeners can relate to so many of those things in staying in, whether it's a job or a relationship or just a space that um, you knew wasn't quite the right fit anymore, but fear is powerful and it can keep us in those places. And we are definitely going to dive more deeply into that as well. So we have talked before, and I also had the opportunity to read through your book, which I would recommend for our listeners as well. It's called The Heartspace: Living with Grace and Ease in an Era of Uncertainty. And I love the whole title of
Yes.
that. And that is so much of what we talk about, and that my listeners are looking for as well. Is we want this grace and ease, but yet we have the fear of the unknown and of clinging often to control, which is counterintuitive, and in terms of living with grace and ease when we're hanging on there. So let's start off by talking just a little bit about the headspace versus the heart space, because that's basically the two sections of your book.
Mhm.
And how did you come up with this idea, and how do you define those two separate concepts?
That's a great question. I'm gonna tell this story from my own story, I mean, how I like figured this out. At work, when you have a lot of experience in your field, you use methodologies, right? So let's say I did a lot of projects, and every projects I knew exactly all the steps and the outcome and how to get there. And as I try to, like, I want to do something different. It's like, but I have no idea how to do it, right? I even don't know what is the second step or third step, even sometimes the first step. So I realized what happened is we at work or most of our life we use headspace so much. The headspace here means our capacity to analyze, our capacity to make hypotheses. So it's everything that we are good at in professional life, and everything that always come from the past experience. For example, we have expertise and we get paid more if we do repetitions. If we do things more and more, we were considered an expert. And in things that we do in our life, it's also about doing things the same thing again and again. But when you go through something new, I thought I was like, this is I start noticing how my brain work, like my head work, because there's a couple traits that I see from myself, also from my client. For example, it's reductive, like it's focused on one thing. And when you focus on one thing, you kind of remove the other part of it. It cannot tolerate any gaps of data. For example, if I talk to someone and suddenly he doesn't talk to you anymore, and you don't know what happening, you start to create story in your head instead of thinking, like, yeah, I have no idea. Or let's say
Mhm.
you want to start a new career, you start, oh, I'm not good enough. You start creating this story to make sense of why it doesn't work, instead of like, you know what, I don't know anything. And it's so hard to let go that not knowing, and I felt it in myself. So
Mhm.
there's a lot, like, very reductive. Let's say, like, you start doing something, and suddenly you ask, like, is it right, am I good enough, or is it the right? So it's always like right or wrong. It's always one or another. It's always about something. It's not only about connection, because every time you talk about something, you create an abstraction of what it is. So that's, I noticed so much, and I realized how much it affects my experience and other people's experience,
Mhm.
especially when we're taking a path that we don't know anything. For analysis, when you feel you can label something, you fully know it. If you cannot name it, you feel you don't know it. And it
Right.
also create a bias, because then, because you know how to label it, you think you know everything about it. It's not.
Right. Right.
Right.
For the listeners, you have a really good summary in your book about when you are kind of living in your headspace. And I just want to name a couple of these. You've
Sure.
said a few, but again, I just think this resonates. So you've talked about being reductive, but also when you're in that headspace, that it's more rigid and you have that narrow focus. Of course, we tend to be analytical, which you said, but also fragmented
Yes.
in the sense that things are just in parts. You're looking for proof and evidence, but at the same time, you're buried in doubt, like you said, with that information gap and looking for that desire for control. And so, even just seeing that in a list form for me, like on the pages of the book, it was like, ooh, yes, I can definitely identify with so many of those. So then you realized all of these that, are not necessarily where you wanted to be. And so how did the heart space come about for you?
Yeah, so the heart space is basically, like I said, I decided to leave my 20 plus year career, and I knew it. I knew that it's gonna be so scary. Because knew about the headspace, I thought, you know what? I just gonna behave differently. I'm just gonna experiment. I'm just gonna allow it. So starting from, I didn't know anything. And also the ideas of, I think, my spiritual journey as well, that kind of allow me to draw into the heart space. And as I start letting go, like, I don't know nothing, like I don't know if I, can pay the bill or whatever it is. then I start noticing my surrounding because I have time instead of, working and having some deadlines and busy. I can go out and meditate and really pay attention to natures. And what I found is small variants in my life, like like in my book, there's like story where I walk in the park, right? It's really teaching me how what it means to drop into the heart space. I see a different hey, something in me, in my capacity, I have a different capacity than just thinking and overthinking. I have capacity because once in a while I'm in the moment of bliss. Once in a while I feel like so fulfilled just doing nothing, just looking at the bird or hearing the sounds. So like, what is this about? Why is it so different?
Right.
Why does it feel
Yeah,
so fulfilled?
right, it's, like, more expansive
Yeah.
than you have it, and like you said, because you are, being reflective, you're observing, there's more s space and really nurturing that curiosity, and I love talking about, curiosity, but, you know, desire of for understanding of yourself and of others rather than the black and white that we get into with the headspace. And we know that one of the things that really keeps us trapped in that headspace and from stepping into things that are bigger for us is fear. You had a whole section there in the book about fear and whether that's the need for control. It might stem from a scarcity mindset and thinking that we always need more. So I just want to talk about that because I think that is so unfortunately common and relatable for so many people, but isn't talked about a whole lot. What brings on that fear? Why is it so hard for us to work through that? And then we'll get to how we work through it as well.
Yeah, it's quite interesting and quite a revelation for me when I realized that actually our analytical capacities, our headspace, the way we reasons, the way we create, put like, because of A, therefore it's B, because of B, therefore it's C. All of those are actually part of our survival mechanism as human being, right? Human has not just the nervous system, like the biological, but also have mental capacity that support our survival. And as human being or any living being, there are three different, self preservation, self reproductions, and sorry, I forgot one more. But the first thing that we as human being would do is to protect ourselves from dangers to so from anything else. That is the most important because otherwise, we cannot we cannot preserve ourselves. We need to live to survive first. So the idea of our analytical, the way we see in a very rigid and reductive way, it's so useful for maintaining our focus on dangers. What I mean is like we develop we evolve from the nature looking at making sure we're safe and not getting killed by poisonous snake, for example. So it is best for us to misinterpret a branch on the ground as a snake rather than a snake as a branch. So we develop a way of focusing more on on the dangers. And that's the way our brain is working. We focusing on predicting what's not working more than
Yes.
ever, especially when you feel uncertain. So of course, then we live in fear because what we're focusing on is always things that not right or lack. And when you focus on lack, of course, you need to protect yourself. Of course, you need to make sure you get enough, right? So, therefore, I found fear, it's not really scary. It's just a normal response of being human because we're using, and the other thing is also because we so reliant on using our headspace. Like, you go to school, you, we were taught about all intellect, about analytical skills, but we never thought about how to use our hearts, intuitions at school. So of course, then that's the only way we're operating even though we
Yes.
have dual operation system where we can kind of go back and forth. And of course, we need that too. We need our analytical capacity, but if we use it too much, then it get overdrive. It's run our life, right? So for me, that's where the fear come from. The fear is because then it kicked into our survival mind, and the more, of course, trauma play a lot of influence a lot of things about it, because the more you experience trauma, the more you hyper vigilant with everything
Mhm.
around you, right? Because
Yes.
to protect yourself.
Well, and I really appreciated your distinction as well with fear and security. And so a lot of us can understand fear and the biological piece that comes into it, but also kind of our conditioning and our culture in the Western world right now that, seeking success, whatever that means, and the wealth and the lifestyle and that sort of thing, often then we equate that with some sort of security. And even as you achieve the next step or the next thing, that it's more for you to hang on to. And
Mhm.
so security becomes almost fear-based as well. And that just really resonated with me in different ways. And I know talking whether that's the economy or people feeling that as business owners or maybe just financial security, and you just even had a reflection question about the how often do you find yourself striving for the next achievement without reflecting on what you have accomplished. And I was like, oh yeah, I do that a lot, as well as then another question like reflecting on the true meaning of security. And it was like, boy, I have thought about that a lot, and for me as a single parent too, there's like the financial security that is tied up in that, and what it means to me is often from a fear and scarcity based system as well. So I just wanted to point that out for our listeners as well, because I think that we don't always see security as having a under as being fear-based, and a lot of times in our brain, that's what we've made the definition out to be.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave that open. If I missed anything, please
Well,
comment.
I want to add something from what you say. I think this is important. This is about security, right? I think it's very important to ask ourselves what, like, personally, because I think the media's advertisement and all this stuff shows us teach us what security is, but that's that's our culture. But can you ask yourself what is security for you? Because I think security related to feeling of safety. It's a sense of safety. Um, and the other thing about the bias in our idea of security is this, right? Um, let's say I make much less than what I have before in my corporate career. Then I felt, God, it's just like it's not enough. I start like not enough because it's just different. I can compare before and after. But I because of that rigidity and fragmentation, I didn't notice that things come up, money come up from a different places. Or, what is security for me? Okay, like, yeah, maybe I'm not as making much, but I everything is enough. I can buy food, I can. So take a really look at, because our mind is always like security is this, money coming from this, meaning like I have my weekly check in my bank account, and I have this, I have a car, I have this, I have that. But those providence comes from different places. And therefore, that's why I said, when we trust a little bit and drop down into the heart space, you start seeing, well, yeah, I'm actually fine. So what
Right.
security means for me? And because of
Mhm.
that, you have less fear
Right.
because you
Yeah.
you expand your understanding about what's secure for you.
Let's talk more about that transition, because for somebody who has those fears and their sense of security and scarcity, it seems almost counterintuitive to lead with your heart space, right? Because that's trust. And if I'm afraid, that makes it really difficult to trust. How do you start this process, knowing that there's an element of fear in the present moment?
Yeah, that's very good questions. The thing is, first of all, if you're fearful, don't judge yourself. Don't say, "Oh, I should not be fearful." Just acknowledge, I'm really afraid of, this or that. I'm worried that I'm this or that. Because by acknowledging it, you don't spend a lot of energy to manage your fear. Because you don't have to. Because as soon as your mind is off from the lack, the fear has disappeared, and then you bring it again in your mind. So don't need to manage your fear. Just acknowledge it that, yeah, I'm worried about it. The second thing is, I just want to bring the word trust. So the word trust, if you see the spelling, it consists right in the middle of it. There's us, right? There's us in it. So in order to trust, you need to bring different element than your own. And for example, in my book, I told a story, many story about trust actually. A small thing is like, I was afraid that I'm gonna be late to a business meeting, and I walk, and I was so like my body, like a lot of tension in my body, and I arrived at the subway on in time. And like, can I trust that my legs are working really hard? And because in those moments, it's all on your head, right? Like we even don't realize that we have body. So can we start trusting small things, like even the way our legs works, our hands, our minds being creative?
Mhm.
Then also I have another story where I walk in the park, and as I walk, I step, the grass, and I realized this is when I was really down. I was very down and feel helpless. I realized that every step I took, the ground is always there beneath me.
Yeah.
And I I saw the contrast of like me trying to make decision and afraid if I'm making the wrong move that I gonna fall somewhere. And I realized, hey, you know what? In reality, not in my mind, in reality, every place I step, left, right, back, forth, whatever it is, there's always ground beneath me. So can we draw those simple moments into showing our own mind what's true?
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. So we start with the trust, with those little things as we're working into it. How else can people start to transition more into the heart space, into leaving our headspace, the overthinking and the analytical brain, and into this next step. So, what else does that look like?
Um, I would say read my book.
Yes, yes, I don't disagree.
Um, yeah. Anyhow, I think that's why my book is two part, right? The head space and the heart space. What I wanted to do when I wrote it is because I want to allow people to see how does their head space works.
Yeah.
So for me, by being more mindful, being more self-aware, and being more reflective, seeing what happened. Let's say if I'm angry with my children or whatever, my coworkers, what happening behind it? Am I
Mhm.
am I really angry or am I disappointed? And sometimes, all the things in our life where we feel like there's a discomfort, we call it negative emotions. Those are moments where like, what is behind it? So I always say that instead of like doubting yourself, like we have this analytical thinking that is powerful. Instead of using it to doubt ourselves, can we use it to doubt our conditioning? Can we use it to
Yeah.
doubt, you know, what is the bias that we have, the belief that
Mhm.
we have that is not supporting
Right.
us? Just use it for the
Right.
right thing. And because when we slow down a bit and really take a look of why we met or why we, the stories that feel so not aligned with us, or the fear, the overthinking, and even what is behind fear,
Mhm.
we'll see a different thing. There's a
Right.
new insights is in that invites you to uncover, for you to grow and expand yourself.
Yes. And actually, I'd highlighted this part, which fits in really well here, when you're talking about learning versus discovery. Again, so many of my listeners, myself included, is we would say that we're committed to personal growth and to learning. But again, this distinction here that you're saying that learning and discovery are two different things because the root of learning is in earn, signifying the acquisition of something. And so that you're acquiring something that you don't have or you don't have enough. But discovery is an action or process of uncovering something. And being in discovery allows you to flow with life, accept change and growth as they naturally unfold. I, again, just really appreciated the nuance between those 2, and to think about this more is it's not just learning, but that we are discovering. I think if that brings in more open curiosity, because for me, sometimes learning can seem it can have some of its rigidity to it, right? Or the more of the black and white thinking. And so, again, just looking at that with the discovery, and I think that is part of it, of being okay and kind of uncovering those things as we are working to get out of our overthinking and rigid brains, moving more into that heart space. Perfect to sum that up. The other piece that I thought was worth mentioning here is just when you talk about listening, and what an important skill that is. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, listening is very interesting. I just recently just did a TEDx talks about how listening can change the world. Um, Listening, like if you really listen, for example, listening to the music or listening to the birds singing and stuff like that, what happened is we move with the music. Like you accept what we listen, right? But most of the time, our habit of listening, not actually listening, but thinking and trying to label and analyze and trying to respond back. And in that way, we basically miss the simple act of listening. So the thing about what I found very interesting about listening is so different than thinking. Listening is when you listen to something, with your ear, with sounds around. You don't have to create those sounds. Right? So, for example, if someone else talking, you don't have to do anything actually. You have to create that sounds. When you go listening to music, you don't have to create every single instrument there and the words, figure out the words. It's already there, and therefore actually listening is so much simpler and easier than thinking, because thinking you have to create something out of nothing. It feels that way. It feels a lot of mental processing, mental energy that you have to put to think, and overthinking, right? And in chapter 10 I put that as also a practice to receive what we hear, right? It's not just receive what we hear, receive what we see, because you will find this subtle difference of how pleasant it is, how easy it is to receive. Because everything we do in this world, and I felt even in the modern world, we still
Mhm.
live in survival where we believe that everything is hard work. We have to
Yeah.
work hard, we have to achieve, we have to grow, we have to do something, otherwise things not gonna happen. But like just by simple awareness of, oh, there's something easy here, then we
Mhm.
know in our body what is easy. Because I think most of us, especially knowing that the former high functioning anxieties, my body in the old days is always tense. So
Yes.
that's the only things I know. I never knew how to relax. But when you kind of experiment these small things like listenings, and you, oh, this is easy, then your body registered that nice feeling that you always can go back.
Yeah. Thank you again for sharing. And that kind of goes along with, another thing that you talk about is just slowing down.
Mm,
I know when you are in that state of either stress or overworking, it's hard to slow down because you're used to the noise, whether that's actual physical noise or the noise in your brain. And you just listed several ways, to slow down that I think is a good list for people as well. Everything from slowing down your breath so that you're more aware of what is alive in you, slowing down your walk, slowing down when you eat, slowing down your speech and your thinking. But I'll leave with this last one on the list. Slow down when you love someone, and you'll be present for them in a way that no one else ever has, free from all expectations and judgment. And we talked offline a little bit more about love and how important that is. So,
mhm.
can you just expand more on how important the process of loving ourselves and other people is within this whole conversation?
I found this is so interesting because I think in our life, what we look for or we seek for, we long for love, like, and acceptance. And a lot of women, especially, who are high achiever, looking for that validation and acceptance through doing a good work or, like, trying really hard. But at the end of the day, the best acceptance, the most true acceptance that we can do is self acceptance. So for me, after writing this book, and I realized we the thing about love is love has two side of it, right? There's the giver and the receiver. So like mothers and a child, for example, a child is the receiver end of what mothers give, but actually in ourself there are two. Those two need to be there. We are a receiver and giver. So I think kind of the universe allow us to have some pain or discomfort and have challenges because it's an opportunity for us to love ourselves. So to become to have an opportunity to give and to receive within ourselves, so it's full, in a full circle. And I felt the task is the journey is how can we love ourselves through the heart space, because it's allow us to hold those contradictions, hold the paradox, hold the inner conflict, so that when we know how to accept and love ourselves, it's so much easier to accept and love others.
Yes, so true. Just to wrap this up, so as someone, we know we have this headspace and the heart space, and that lots of people start out being fully in the headspace. We want to balance that out or be more into the heart space. But what is the end result? We know that it's more expansive, but, when you have had people go through this process, whether that's through coaching or other ways of working with you, like, what happens to people, and how do they describe, um, the benefits of doing some of this work?
Mm. It's quite interesting because even for myself, I guess I can speak mostly from myself because I'm noticing every step of it. With clients, yeah, there's always a good story at the end. Oh yeah, I have this, but like, I don't know the whole story. But what I found is the headspace is not about happy ending, because our life is not there's no end journey. It's an expansion. And what I felt for me by living more on the heart space, you become more aware of the oneness, how you are part of the whole, instead of alone. And the idea also, there's less problem that you experience. Not because the problem disappear, because, like, let's say you have problem in your marriage or with your kids, the kids are still there, right? But it's more about, it's not a problem anymore for you because you can see all the gifts that comes even with the challenges. So when you get up in the morning, you don't feel like, oh, I need to do this, I need to prepare. It's just like you become more relaxed, you become more aware, you are more in the states of joy and awe. So you see divine guidance beyond what you were taught, let's say at church or mosque or whatever it is, it become that spiritual experience become yours. It's not because you learn from somebody else, but you experience what it feels like, what is peace look like, and you are able to accept like a huge acceptance. Because, for example, I don't go along well every time with my daughter. My daughter push my button. She's 10, Sometimes I get upset, I get mad, and she get mad. And what happened is I allow her to get mad at me because I felt like, you know what, if I can get mad, she can get mad too. It's okay. And because I know behind it, we love one another. So I'm not afraid of bad feeling. I'm not afraid of making mistakes, of getting emotional because I know I can return back. Right. And the reason why we're so afraid of having bad feeling is we felt like it's forever. But if we can see, oh, this is just a feeling being human, different perspective or opinions, yeah, of course, because we have a bigger and compassing understanding about how life works, because we see it from the heart space. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. So, is there any other takeaways that you would like to offer the listeners today that we haven't hit on?
Um, I just, I guess the idea is don't be afraid of your fear, and that's also my intention for the book. Don't be afraid of your fear. There's nothing to be afraid of your fear. It's just a normal, or anxiety actually, or overthinking. It's just, you can see it's just a normal reaction. Like if you put your hands in warm water, you feel warm. Or if it's salt too much, it feels salty. You don't say, "Oh my God, it's salty. It's my fault. Why is it salty?" Just like, yeah, because I put salt so much in it. So it becomes sure. And then when it feel come, and then maybe you feel it, and then it's disappeared because you know behind it. And then everything that you experience of the discomfort, there's always something beautiful, it's a gift behind it. If you can accept that invitation and really open up and look what it is, there are much more that we can experience in life. It's amazing because you can love yourself more because you don't have to manage all the fear or uncomfortable feelings, or the fear of certainty, because you see like, yeah, of course I'm fearful because I'm human, but then I know the next day things kind of come and I can trust. So you can handle both. You
Uh-huh.
can, it's not black and white anymore. It's just a beautiful day, because a beautiful day consists of night and day.
Yes, thank you. So, I will have links in the show notes where people can find you. Where is the best place for people to find you, though? Is it social media, your website? What's your preference?
Um, my social media have it's Kristen Samuel here. You also can sign up for my newsletter. I write weekly. I send a weekly reflection. I
Mhm.
also give a one chapter free download from my website, christiansamuel.ca. So you can start from there, depending on your preferences.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much. And again, you can find those links in the show notes, and to her book as well, The Heart Space: Living with Grace and Ease in an Era of Uncertainty. Thank you so much for being with us today, Christine. It was
Well,
an honor to have this conversation with you. And listeners, I will be back with another episode next week.
thank you, Kristen.
Thank you for listening to the Stop Overthinking podcast with Kristen Odegaard. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who would benefit from the message. To learn more about working with me and links to social media and free resources, head over to my website, coachwithkristen.com. That's Kristen spelled Kristen. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Have a great week.